sun is shining, this thing is gonna work. You can learn it like that, and I'm telling you, anybody can learn it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to show you how to use the prophecy pipe, also known as the tube and worm rig. It works every day, from sunrise to sunset. I do best between the hours of like 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. when the sun is at its brightest. That's when this thing is the most effective, because striped bass are primarily sight feeders. There's 10 steps. If you follow these 10 steps, you will catch striped bass, and you will catch them every time you go fishing if you follow these 10 steps. And I'll leave a link to a few other videos that you guys might find helpful in the description of this video. Rule number one, or step number one, tip number one, is presentation is everything. And presentation includes a lot. One of the most important things about the presentation is how the worm is on your hook. You don't want it all bunched up. You don't want it hanging off from the tip. You want it hanging straight back, as if it were attached to the tube. That's very important. But what also goes into presentation is your speed, your depth, and how that thing is rotating. If it's not corkscrewing, it's not going to be effective. I see guys all the time out there with the tubes tipped with nothing, and they're just trolling a straight tube. You're not going to catch fish like that. I've never fished any tube and worm without tipping it with something. I prefer to use a fresh sandworm. Gulp works, but I just don't catch as many fish with gulp as I do with a live sandworm. Those guys that are afraid to touch a sandworm, use gulp, it'll work, but you're not going to catch as many as you would as if you were using a sandworm. So here we have a box of sandworms. I have about 2 dozen in here. The females get much bigger. They have orange legs, and they tend to be like a more greenish color. And what you do is you put the hook right through their mouth, right through there. It kind of slides right in. If you get it in the right spot, it goes right in there and straight back down like it should, like it's attached, and it's inside there. That's the way you want it to look. Just like, see how that thing is corkscrewing? And you got a nice sandworm hanging off the end. That's exactly how you want it to look. It looks crazy. After you hook up, just keep going. Keep pedaling or paddling. Make sure that hook really sets in there. And then keep tension the whole time as you reel in. Don't ever give them any slack. Because once you give them a little bit of slack, they can wiggle their heads and it can come off. This is a really small one. But when you start finding out where the small ones are, the big guys are in the same spots. Once I really learned how to use it, I stopped getting skunked. This thing always finds the fish. Rule number 2 is use a lot of line. You want to let out a lot of line. And I can't tell you how much line, because it all depends on what kind of line you're using. Tip number 3 is you want to be hitting bottom, but you don't want to pick up any bottom. Because once there's seaweed on here and on the hook, you're most likely not going to catch a fish. So you want to hit bottom. But not pick up bottom. It's not going to work like that. That means I was at the right depth. So that's a catch-22. It's a little bit hard to do, but if this thing's rotating properly, you know, the top and the hook aren't really ever going to hit the bottom. This part hits the bottom, and that's good because striped bass have great hearing, but they can't always hear where sounds are coming from. Just like you, if you were to stick your head under the water at a pool, you're going to hear sounds. You're going to hear people outside the water, you're going to hear the sounds in the water, but you can't really tell where it's coming from. And it's the same thing for a striped bass, but they are great at locating sounds when they're bouncing off something. When this is hitting the bottom, they can pick that up. They know exactly where it's coming from. To avoid getting snagged up, don't stop for too long. It's good to occasionally pause, because a lot of times these things hit this as you're letting line out, as it's falling down. And that's why I never just cast it out. I let out line as I go. And that's the way I recommend to do it, because if you just cast it out, you're more likely to hook your line for the worm to move and not be presented properly. This is my first year where I'm using a pedal drive kayak. And it definitely helps to hold the rod because I can feel everything. I feel when I'm hitting the bottom. I feel when a bass is biting. So whenever you're hitting bottom or a bass is biting, keep going for a little bit. I recommend 20 to 30 yards. And then after that 30 yards, if you're not getting the bite, check it out. Reel it in and check to see if it's covered with seaweed or if you have a worm left. Most of my fish are when I'm letting line out, changing directions, and when I'm hitting the bottom. Because they hear it, they can locate it, and they go check it out. And they see it, it looks real, it tastes real, and then they eat it. I don't think the hook's all the way through. That's a good one though, that's a slot fish. Just broke my reel. I'm saying, guys, 100% effective. Every day of the week, these things work. I'm not lying to you. He's like 28 inches. He's a keeper. Mouth, but it's like through his tongue almost. Nice fish though. Let's watch him swim away. There he goes. Nice fish, good start. Haven't put in much time. Yeah, it could work without having it tipped, but it's gonna work every time if you have a sandworm on there. It's always gonna work. It's gonna work. Where you want to use the tube and worm rig is along the shoreline and at points. Green side of the worm is matching the green side of the tube this way. The color of the legs all lines up. It equates to the perfect presentation. When you're trolling the tube and worm, I recommend trolling slow. But I can't tell you how slow or how fast because it all depends on how deep you are, what type of line you're using, and you know, the current. There's a lot that goes into it, so I can't just say let out 50 yards of line, because sometimes I have out that much line, but sometimes I only have out 20 yards of line. It all depends on how deep I am, and it depends on the day. I change up speeds. I never just go the same speed all of the time, because some days they want it a little bit faster, and some days you gotta go a little bit slower. So you really have to change up your speed and change up your direction, zigzag a little bit. But troll along the shoreline at a slow pace is the most common way to use these things, and usually is very productive. But there are days where you're gonna have to change up your speed and definitely change up your direction. When you get close to the boat, you wanna loosen up on the drag a little. But when you're trolling, you want that drag tight. Not too tight to where it flips you over, but tight enough to where it's gonna set the hook. This is a good one. It's definitely better. Yeah, it's definitely bigger. It's a nice fish. Wish I had a bigger cooler. You probably want to be right under that fin, right there, so you're holding them properly. When you get into those big fish, they start straightening the tube out. But that's why I have that bendable wire inside there. So you bend it back, and now it's going to stay like that, at least until they bite it. Anybody can do this. It's a lure and it's bait fishing at the same time. Kind of like a bucktail and something live. Lure fishing, bait fishing come together as one and make the ultimate lure. Something that works every day of the week. Every time the sun is shining, the tube and worm rig is going to work if you do it correctly. I'm going to flip him over, rotate him on the hook, so that green, before I had him upside down and I wasn't getting bit, and then I simply did that. I just made the green match up with the green, and then I caught one right after that. And the orange matches with the orange. They cannot resist it. Damn, my wrist hurts from catching so many fish. Nice little chubby guy. Probably a slot. It's 28 on the nose. sandworm there. Make it look like it's a piece of it. And the one thing I don't like, got a piece of gulp on there now. Look at that thing shine. I can't resist it. I just got a little piece of gulp on there. 24, 25. Oh, that thing went through both of his lips. Not a bad fish. Let's get back. About to hit a friggin' rock over here. So where you want to use the tubes, along the shoreline, get as close to the shoreline as you can without hitting the rocks. See, like this is a big island right here, and it comes to a point over here, and striped bass will be hanging out on points. I'm just going to troll along the point. Right off the point, I was actually reeling it in. I had hit a rock. Yeah, he was hanging out right on the point. That's where they hang out, guys. Right on the points. You know, not every day do you get the 40-inch class fish, but if you can learn how to get these guys in the boat, keep catching these guys, eventually you're going to get those big ones. It's the same thing, man. You just got to pull a little bit harder. They all bring different challenges. No two fights are identical. This was awesome because I was reeling it in. Little guy, probably like 24. It's 24. So that was really cool because I had so much line out when I was swinging around back around the point because it's the current's too strong out there, so I'm gonna stay in. I started reeling in and I got stuck on a rock, and I was able to get it out, and I was like, let me just reel real slow in case the striper heard that. He's gonna come check it out. What happened? You hit it right after that, and then I just set the hook. The rest is history. That's when I turned the camera on. And you could see there's nothing going on around here. There's no surface activity. I don't have a fish finder. All I have is a prophecy pipe. Just gonna keep tension, keep paddling. He hit it a couple times first. Then I gave it a jerk. And right after one of the hits, I jerked it immediately and smacked it. Shy of being a keeper. It's 27. Shy. All red prophecy pipe with the camera on. So when your friends ask you, do you have a fish finder on your kayak or boat? Say, yeah, I have a prophecy pipe. Diamond jig. I got something. It's a baby porgy. I just snagged him. Got something bigger. It's a fluke. I came off. I wasn't gonna keep him anymore. Striper on the metal. Oh no, it's too weak. Oh, that is a nice weak fish. I'm telling you, if the sun is shining, this thing is gonna work. It just takes a little bit of time, not a lot of time. You can learn it like that, and I'm telling you, anybody can learn it. And then once you learn it, you can catch striped bass pretty much at will.